Which is more important to the Biden administration, getting the proposal President Biden wants in its entirety, or getting legislation that's likely more modest but bipartisan with Republican support? Because it does not seem like you're going to be able to get both.
Well, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity now to have bipartisan support for a big, bold vision on infrastructure. I see it in the conversations I'm having with Republicans and Democrats on the Hill. I definitely see it in the conversations I'm having with people across the country. Americans don't need a lot of selling to know that we've got to do big things when it comes to our infrastructure. And the truth is, you can't separate the climate part from this vision, because every road we fix, every bridge we build, we can either do it in a way that's better for the climate or worse for the climate. Why wouldn't we want to be creating these jobs in a way that's better for the climate?
So that sounds like you're saying there's an opportunity for bipartisanship, but you want to do what's big and bold and you feel is needed. Take a listen to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell last week.
We're hearing the next few months might bring a so-called infrastructure proposal that may actually be a Trojan horse for massive tax hikes and other job-killing left-wing policies.
So Senate Democrats are keeping open the possibility of introducing this legislation under the special budget rules, which would require only 50 votes, not 60, meaning you could do it without any Republican support. What will it mean, do you think, if Biden's first two big legislative pushes get zero Republican support?
Well, let's remember the American Rescue Plan had lots of Republican support, an enormous amount of Republican support, just not here in Washington. I think we can do better than that, though, with this infrastructure bill. I think this can be something that will reflect not only popularity among the American people, but I hope we can work in good faith with folks across the aisle in Congress to get some votes there. Ultimately, it's up to them whether they're going to support something, but we're going to work with them to try to shape it in a way that earns as much support as possible. And at the same time, the American people can't wait. We've got $1 trillion backlog just in things like our roads and bridges. We've got to act, and I really am encouraged by what I believe to be the sincere expressions of interest that I'm hearing from the other side of the aisle on doing something real. Let's make very clear, this is a jobs bill that's going to have climate benefits. And I think that's something we should all be able to get behind.
Who are some of the Republicans that you're talking to that you feel encouraged when you talk to them?
You know, I'll leave it to them. Some of them like to talk in public about our conversations, and some of them don't, and I'm fine with that. I'm trying to find the deal space for what we can all come together around. And as the president rolls out his vision, beginning with the Wednesday announcement, I think folks are going to find that it strikes a chord around the country. And my hope is that means that it'll bring people across the aisle to the table here in Washington, too.
Now, you have said that you want to have it paid for, at least part of it, with either spending cuts or tax increases. It's possible that there's some moderate Democrats who won't support a raise in taxes, including Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey. He told Axios he's worried that tax increases could theoretically slow the economic recovery. He said, quote, "We need to be careful not to do anything that's too big or too much in the middle of a pandemic and an economic crisis," unquote. As of right now, is raising taxes on wealthier Americans the primary funding source for your plan?
Well, you're going to hear more details from the administration in the coming days about how to pay for this. But one thing I will do is reiterate the president's commitment that his proposals will not raise taxes at all on anyone making under $400,000 a year.
So nobody who makes under $400,000 a year will see a tax increase. You said also that a mileage tax showed, quote, a lot of promise as a way to help pay for the plan. That tax would charge people for how many miles they drive. Is that under consideration?
No, that's not part of the conversation about this infrastructure bill. So just want to make sure that's really clear. But you will be hearing a lot more details in the coming days about how we envision being able to fund this. And again, these are carefully thought through, responsible ideas that ultimately are going to be a win for the economy and need to be compared to the unaffordable cost of the status quo.
Okay, so something of a backtrack on that. Let me ask you about, is there a possible increase in the gas tax? That's a tax that has not been raised in years, as you know. Is that under consideration?
No, and again, I want to reiterate the president's central commitment here. If you're making less than $400,000 a year, this proposal will not involve a tax increase for you.
There are still about 10 million Americans unemployed right now. How many jobs do you anticipate your infrastructure and transportation plan will create? And is putting people back to work the primary goal, or is it the secondary goal?
Well, I think the president views this as an opportunity to boost American competitiveness. So I think of this as a jobs vision, which also means a lot in terms of climate, means a lot in terms of recovery, means a lot in terms of equity. I know some folks in Washington want to try to slice these things or separate them. To me, talking about infrastructure and saying you don't want to mention climate is like talking about food and saying you don't want to mention nutrition. They all go hand in hand, but fundamentally, this is a jobs bill. As far as the numbers, I'm really excited to see what the economists do to score the details that the president will be sharing in the next few days. Safe to say, we're going to be looking at millions of jobs, and maybe most importantly of all, a chance to restore America's leadership role at a time where right now we run a very real risk of being left behind because of the cost of disinvestment in our infrastructure.
This afternoon, your department announced that more than $30 billion from the American Rescue Plan will be available for public transit systems who are no doubt suffering during this pandemic. How long do you think it will take in order to get the ridership back up to a place where even the busiest transit systems, such as the ones in New York or Washington, D.C., have enough riders to break even?
Well, what we've been able to do, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, is get back from the cliff that a lot of these transit agencies were up against. As you said, over $30 billion being made available. And I want to stress, this isn't just the big city transit agencies you think about, but also going out to rural communities everywhere that it's needed. And it's helping us fight COVID by getting people to where they need to be. Now, the one thing I want to mention in terms of ridership is we still don't know what some of the permanent changes are going to be because we've been through such a shift in the way that Americans work, that the way that Americans get to work may change too. That's something that may take years to play out, but what we've been able to do right here and right now is avoid these route cuts and layoffs that were going to be very real this very spring had the Congress and the president not acted with the rescue plan.
All right, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thank you. Good to see you again.
Same here. Thanks.